The tipping point is really 1948, when following the war of 1948 and the expulsion of the vast majority of Palestinians, as I trace in the book, Israel is faced with a choice because it promises, this new state promises to issue a constitution that would be in the spirit of its declaration of a state that promised equal treatment to all people in the country. But that constitution is never actually adopted by Israel. Israel to this day has no constitution. It also has no borders that it recognizes. And because of that, Israel never really becomes a normal state and a normal civil society, but takes on Zionism as its state ideology. And as such, it begins to tilt more and more in the direction that I described. Okay. It's not inevitable. There are various changes on the way, of course.
Professor, perhaps I should have prefaced this chat we're having with just a bit of your background to illustrate where you're actually coming from. You were born and raised in Israel. Your father was a Zionist, but you've been speaking out now, of course, against the genocide in Gaza, and you insist that calling it genocide does not make you anti-Semitic. And I think that's key here. You have to explain why so many of your countrymen equate your position against Zionism with anti-Semitism.
Yes, I mean, people do, but of course that's a sort of propaganda point of view, what's called hasbara, that's Israeli propaganda. Look, I mean, anti-Semitism is a prejudice, and it attributes particular qualities to Jews. Zionism is an ideology. You may like it, you may not like it, you may adopt it, you may reject it, but it's an ideology. There are many Jews around the world, and there were many before, who were not Zionists or anti-Zionists. Many of the ultra-Orthodox Jews around the world are anti-Zionists. They don't believe that there should be a Jewish state before the Messiah arrives. It does not make them anti-Semites. So this position, which was really adopted and propagated by the Israeli government, most successfully by the multiple Netanyahu administrations, is one whose goal is to prohibit any criticism of Israel's increasingly indefensible policies by saying that such criticism is anti-Semitic. As you know, I was born and raised in Israel. I served for 4 years in the Israeli army and subsequently also in the reserve. I've written a great deal about the Holocaust. So to describe me as anti-Semitic is somewhat bizarre. But that is what this kind of propaganda tries to do.
Fair enough. But then you say that you don't believe Zionism can be reformed, but the State of Israel can. So explain how the State of Israel can change to become a non-apartheid entity. What would actually need to happen? You've described in your book some kind of shock therapy. What does that mean?
So first of all, look, I mean, states change. Israel is there to stay. It's not going away as a state, as an entity. But states that have particular ideologies, if they want to survive and thrive, have to change that. South Africa was an apartheid state until 1994. Nazi Germany was the most violent genocidal state in modern history. But Germany exists today. So first of all, it is possible, and it has happened in the past. How that would change? It would change by Israel finally giving up on Zionism, which it should have done really in 1948, as I said, and convert itself into a normal state with a constitution. It can do that, but in order to do that, it would have to regulate, to finally resolve the main issue at the core of that state, which is the relationship between Jews and Palestinians. There's 7 million Jews and 7 million Palestinians living between the river and the sea. And the 7 million Palestinians are under the boot of the 7 million Jews. And none of them is going away. So they have to find a way to share that space. When they do, the nature of the state will change. It can be a land for all. It can be a binational state. It can be a confederation. But what it cannot remain is what it is now, which is a state with an apartheid regime in the West Bank, with the genocidal regime in Gaza, and apartheid creeping rapidly into Israel itself. That is not sustainable morally, ethically, and in the long run, politically.
It's interesting. I mean, your arguments make sense, but it's difficult to get so many of your, again, fellow countrymen to really agree with you. So while you say Zionism is not reformable, the state of Israel actually is, you have to explain to those who say, you know, Zionism only means maintaining Israel as a Jewish state. So changing that state would mean stripping Israel of its Jewish state status. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a majority of Israelis that would ever agree with that. So how do you go about making these changes, bringing about this kind of shock therapy to make Israel the kind of peaceful and democratic state that you'd like to see?
So look, I mean, two things are needed. As I said, shock therapy, what I mean by that is that there needs to be much greater pressure on the state of Israel to realize the limits of its own power, which right now are being set in Washington, D.C., not in Jerusalem. When those limits on Israeli power are returned to Jerusalem, Israel will have to opt for politics rather than bombs, because it will not have enough bombs and enough strength and enough political international capital that the United States provides it with. So that's what I mean by shock therapy. And that is not happening right now, but may, and there's signs that it may happen both from the United States and from Europe. The second thing is to find a way, as you say, for Israelis to accept the notion to change their thinking about the nature of the state itself. Now, it is possible, and there is a plan that I support, a confederation plan, which would create a Jewish state, which exists already, but along the borders of 67, and a Palestinian state that would exist on the other side of the 1967 border. The problem, of course, is the issue of Palestinians. But according to this plan, there would be a distinction between citizenship and residence. So people could be citizens of one state and residents of another. You could be a Palestinian living in Houston, Texas, and you trace your family to Haifa, and you could become a citizen of the state of Palestine and apply for residence in Haifa. And you could be a Jewish settler if you decide to stay in the state of Palestine, and you would be a citizen of Israel and a resident of Palestine. But you would have to abide by the laws of that state, and if you do not, then you would be deported. So there would be two states. They would have open borders. They would have institutions that would represent the confederation, and both groups would have what they want, as you say. What both Jews and Palestinians want is a right of self-determination and a right of return. And this would enable that to happen without violence and without uprooting populations from one place to another.
Realistically, what are the chances that you think that could ever happen? I mean, you're again talking even about a two-state solution that so many have said is just out of the question now. It's gone too far beyond ever reconciling with two states. So what are the chances of that peace, in your vision, actually being instituted?
Well, first of all, it's not the defunct two-state solution, which indeed is not possible anymore. As I said, it's a confederation that makes it possible for people to move across the borders and live in the other state. What are the possibilities of that happen? Right now, there's very few people who support it. But I would say that even opinion polls today show that both Jews and Palestinians in that territory, if you were to offer them a viable plan and to show them that there is power behind it, that there's a political leadership willing to pursue it, they would support it, because all people there, or most people at least, want to have a better future for themselves and for their children. But to start that off, there has to be massive international pressure, first of all, on Israel, which has largely a hegemony of power there. And that will have to come, first of all, from the United States. There are, as I say, indications of a major swing in American politics vis-a-vis Israel. When Israel is put into its proper place politically, that change may begin to happen, and the new political leadership that we are waiting for among Jewish Israelis and among Palestinians will begin to emerge.